Imagine a city of 14 million souls, wrapped in smog and suspicion, where cameras, watch cameras and the intelligence services have ears in the walls. Now imagine breaking into the heart of that city, not to plant a bomb, not to kidnap a general, but to steal a secret, so heavy it takes trucks to carry it out. This is not fiction. This is not Hollywood. This is what happened in Tehran, in the dead of night, when a team of operatives cracked open a warehouse, defeated 32 safes, and walked away with half a ton of Iran's most guarded nuclear files. No shots fired. No alarms raised. No trace left behind until the men who ordered it wanted the world to know. Tonight, we go inside the Tehran Heist. The preparation that took years, the execution that took hours, the aftermath that shook diplomacy from Washington to Vienna. This is the story of spies who moved like ghosts, a nation caught with its secrets exposed, and a question that still hangs over the Middle East. What happens when your enemy proves they can reach you anywhere? Part 1: The Target. To understand what was stolen, you have to understand what it meant. For decades, Iran's nuclear program has been the Middle East's longest-running riddle. Is it peaceful as Tehran insists, or is it a patient march toward a weapon that would redraw the region's power map? Western intelligence agencies spent billions trying to answer that question. The International Atomic Energy Agency sent inspectors, wrote reports, flagged inconsistencies. Diplomats negotiated limits.
Sanctions squeezed.
And still, the core question lingered: what did Iran actually do and what did it keep? By the mid-2010s, the official story from Tehran was clear. Yes, there had been research. Yes, there had been studies. But any weapons-related work had stopped years ago, around 2003, and the program since then was entirely civilian. The 2015 nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, was built in part on the premise that this past could be managed, contained, and eventually closed. Israel never believed it. In Jerusalem, the assessment was different. Analysts argued that Iran had not abandoned its weapons ambitions. It had archived them. Somewhere in Iran, they believed, a physical record survived: the blueprints, the calculations, the organizational charts of a program called Project Ahmad. If that archive could be found, and if it could be taken, it would prove that Tehran's assurances were hollow. It would arm negotiators with facts. It would change the politics of the nuclear deal. And it would send a message that no vault in Iran was beyond reach. The problem was finding it. Part 2: The Hunt. Intelligence work is mostly patience. The dramatic moments, the break-ins, the escapes are the punctuation marks in a long sentence written in waiting. 4 years, Israeli intelligence, primarily the Mossad, worked to locate the archive. This meant recruiting sources inside Iran, a task made brutal by the Islamic Republic's layered security apparatus. It meant monitoring communications, tracking personnel, and piecing together fragments of information that, alone, meant nothing but together formed a picture. According to accounts that have since become public, the breakthrough came from human intelligence, someone inside Iran who knew where the files were kept. That source, whose identity remains protected, pointed to an unlikely location. Not a fortified bunker, not a military base, but a nondescript warehouse in an industrial district of South Tehran called Shorabad. The building looked like what it was supposed to look like, a storage facility, unremarkable, forgettable. That was the point. Inside, according to later Israeli disclosures, were 32 safes, industrial grade, fireproof, designed to resist exactly the kind of intrusion that was about to happen. And inside those safes, tens of thousands of pages of documents, compact disks, and files that recorded Iran's nuclear weapons research in painstaking detail. Once the location was confirmed, the planning began. Part 3: The Plan. Breaking into a building in Tehran is not like breaking into a building anywhere else. Iran's capital is one of the most surveilled cities in the world. The Ministry of Intelligence and Security, Vevik, and the Revolutionary Guard's intelligence arm operate overlapping networks of informants, cameras, and checkpoints. Foreigners are watched. unusual activity, is reported. The penalty for espionage is death, and not a distant theoretical death, but the kind that appears on state television as a warning to others. The team that planned the operation, reportedly Mossad officers and affiliated operatives, had to solve a series of interlocking problems. First, access. How do you get a team into Iran, equipped with the tools needed to defeat industrial safes without being detected at the border or in the city? Second, timing. The warehouse was not unguarded, but security was not constant. There were windows, hours when attention was lower, when the streets were quieter, when an operation could move without witnesses. Third, extraction. The goal was not to photograph the files. It was to take them originals, not copies, because originals carry a weight that scans do not. They can be authenticated. They can be shown to skeptics. They can be held up on a stage. But originals are heavy. Half a ton of paper and discs does not fit in a pocket. Fourth, escape. Once the files were out of the building, they had to leave Iran entirely. That meant moving through a city on alert, across a country with multiple security layers, to a border or an extraction point that would not be compromised. The operation reportedly involved months of rehearsal. Teams practiced on replicas of the safes. They studied the building's layout. They mapped escape routes. They prepared contingencies for what could go wrong, because in a city like Tehran, everything can go wrong. And then, on a night in early 2018, they moved. Part 4, the night. The details of what happened inside that warehouse come from Israeli officials who later chose to reveal them, partly for propaganda, partly for deterrence, partly because the story was too good to keep entirely secret. According to those accounts, the team entered the building undetected. They worked fast. The safes were opened using torches designed to cut through reinforced steel without triggering fire alarms. Inside, they found exactly what they had been told to expect. Rows of binders, stacks of disks, folders organized by project and date. The archive of Project Ahmad, preserved in the kind of meticulous bureaucratic detail that only a state program produces. They did not take everything. There was not time. Instead, they triaged, grabbing the most critical files, the disks that held the densest data, the documents that would be hardest to dismiss as forgeries. They loaded the material into vehicles. And then they left. By dawn, the team and the archive were out of Tehran. By the time Iranian authorities understood what had happened, if they understood at all in those first hours, the files were already crossing borders, moving toward a destination where they would be cataloged, translated, and prepared for the world. The heist was complete. Part 5, the reveal. For weeks, the world did not know. Then, on April 30th, 2018, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stood before a bank of cameras in Tel Aviv. Behind him, a stage had been set. Black binders on shelves, silver discs. In rows, a screen ready to display slides. The presentation was theatrical by design. Netanyahu pulled back a curtain, gestured to the files, and delivered a message aimed as much at Washington as at Tehran. Iran lied, he said. He described the archive in detail. 55,000 pages. 183 compact discs. Documents showing weapons design work, warhead calculations, integration. Studies for ballistic missiles. He named Project Ahmad. He named its director Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, the physicist long suspected of leading Iran's weapons efforts. He showed diagrams, photographs, organizational charts. He argued that the archive proved Iran had not abandoned its nuclear weapons ambitions, it had merely hidden them. The reaction was immediate and divided. In Washington, the Trump administration seized on the presentation as justification for withdrawing from the nuclear deal. 8 days later, on May 8th, the United States formally exited the agreement, reimposing sanctions and setting the stage for a new round of confrontation. In Europe, reactions were more cautious. Officials noted that much of the material predated 2003, the period when Western intelligence already believed weapons work had occurred. The question was whether the archive revealed ongoing deception or merely confirmed old suspicions. The answer depended on whom you asked. In Tehran, the response was denial. Officials dismissed the presentation as theater, the documents as fabrications, the entire operation as a stunt designed to sabotage diplomacy. But the denial rang hollow. The files were too detailed, too consistent with what inspectors had long suspected. And the breach itself, the fact that Mossad had walked into the capital and walked out with half a ton of secrets, was a humiliation that no amount of rhetoric could erase. Part 6, The Fallout. The Tehran Heist did not happen in isolation. It was part of a longer shadow war between Israel and Iran, a war fought with code, with car bombs, with drones, and with operations like this one. In the years before the heist, that war had already claimed lives. Iranian nuclear scientists had been assassinated in Tehran streets, killed by magnetic bombs attached to their cars, by gunmen on motorcycles, by methods that left little doubt about who was responsible. The Stuxnet worm, reportedly a joint American-Israeli creation, had sabotaged centrifuges at Natanz, setting back Iran's enrichment program by years. Explosions had struck missile facilities. Fires had broken out at sensitive sites. The archive operation fit this pattern, but it also transcended it. This was not sabotage. This was exposure. The goal was not to destroy capability but to destroy credibility, to prove, with paper and ink, that Iran's leaders had lied. For Israel, the operation was a strategic success. It provided ammunition for the campaign against the nuclear deal. It demonstrated reach and capability. It sent a message to Iranian officials. We know where you keep your secrets, and we can take them. For Iran, the operation was a strategic wound. It revealed gaps in security that no amount of internal review could fully close. It forced a reckoning with the fact that someone, somewhere, had betrayed the location of the archive. And it invited the question that haunts every intelligence service after a breach. What else do they know? Part 7, The Verification. In the months that followed, the archive became a subject of intense scrutiny. The IAEA, the international body responsible for monitoring Iran's nuclear program, received access to portions of the material. Inspectors used it to formulate new questions for Tehran. They visited sites that the archive identified, including a location in Tehran's Turkizabad district that Iranian officials dismissed as a carpet-cleaning facility. At that site, inspectors found traces of uranium, particles that should not have been there if the location was what Iran claimed. Iran's explanations were inconsistent. Access was delayed, then granted, then restricted. Documents were requested and not provided. The IAEA's reports grew more pointed, noting outstanding questions and possible undeclared nuclear material. For skeptics of the nuclear deal, this was confirmation. For defenders of the deal, it was a distraction, a focus on the past that obscured the more urgent question of the present. What was Iran doing now, and how could it be constrained? The debate continues to this day. Part 8, The Scientist. One name from the archive stood above the others. Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, described by Israeli officials as the father of Iran's nuclear weapons program. Fakhrizadeh was a physicist, a brigadier general in the Revolutionary Guard, and a figure whose importance was matched only by his obscurity. He rarely appeared in public. His photograph was not widely known. His work was conducted in the shadows. The archive changed that. Netanyahu's presentation put Fakhrizadeh's name on screens around the world. It identified him as the man who had led Project Ahmad, who had overseen the research that the archive documented, who remained, according to Israeli assessments, central to Iran's nuclear ambitions. In November 2020, Fakhrizadeh was assassinated. The attack occurred on a highway east of Tehran. According to Iranian accounts, the weapon was a remote-controlled machine gun mounted in a vehicle operated by satellite. The precision was remarkable. Fakhrizadeh was killed. His wife, sitting beside him, was unharmed. Iran blamed Israel. Israel did not confirm. The killing was the culmination of a campaign that had begun with the archive and ended with a bullet. It removed a man whose knowledge could not be easily replaced. It also deepened the shadow war, pushing Iran and Israel closer to a confrontation that neither fully controls. Part 9. The meaning. What did the Tehran heist accomplish? The answer depends on what you value. If you value knowledge, the operation was a triumph. It provided the most detailed picture ever obtained of Iran's nuclear weapons work, confirmed suspicions, filled gaps, and gave inspectors new leverage. If you value diplomacy, the operation was a complication. It armed the campaign against the nuclear deal, contributed to its collapse, and left the world without a framework to constrain Iran's program. In the years since, Iran has enriched uranium to higher levels, installed more advanced centrifuges, and reduced cooperation with inspectors. If you value deterrence, the operation was a statement. It told Iran and the world that Israel could reach into the heart of the Islamic Republic and take what it wanted. That message has value in a region where perception shapes behavior. If you value stability, the operation was a gamble. It escalated the shadow war, invited retaliation, and pushed the Middle East closer to a conflict that could spiral beyond control. Part 10. The Operatives. We do not know their names. The men and women who carried out the Tehran heist remain anonymous, protected by the secrecy that defines their profession. They are not celebrated in public. They do not give interviews. Their contribution is measured in mission accomplished, not in medals displayed. But their achievement is worth pausing over. They entered one of the most hostile environments on Earth, defeated sophisticated security, extracted a massive cache of material, and escaped without a trace. In the annals of intelligence operations, the Tehran heist ranks among the most audacious, a feat of planning, execution, and nerve that will be studied for decades. Part 11. The questions that remain. Every intelligence operation leaves questions unanswered. Who was the source inside Iran who revealed the archive's location? That person's identity remains one of the most closely guarded secrets in the intelligence world. If they are still alive, they are almost certainly in danger. If they have been caught, they have almost certainly been executed. What else was in the archive that has not been revealed? The Israeli presentation showed only a fraction of the material. The rest remains classified, its contents known only to a handful of analysts and policymakers. How did the team escape? The logistics of moving half a ton of material out of Iran remain murky. Some accounts suggest a dash to the border. Others suggest a more patient exfiltration, with the files hidden in safe houses before being moved in stages. The truth may be a combination of both. And perhaps most importantly, what has Iran done in response? Security services have undoubtedly tightened procedures, hunted for leaks, and prepared for the possibility of future operations. But some vulnerabilities cannot be closed. The Tehran heist proved that even the most paranoid state can be penetrated, and that knowledge is not easily unlearned. Part 12. The shadow war continues. The heist was not the end. It was a chapter. In the years since, the shadow war between Israel and Iran has intensified. Assassinations have continued. Cyberattacks have struck. Drones have been launched and intercepted. Missiles have flown. The two nations, which have no diplomatic relations and share no border, are locked in a contest that plays out across the region, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq, in the waters of the Gulf. The Tehran heist is a reminder of what that contest involves. Not just armies and alliances, but the quiet work of intelligence, the recruitment of sources, the analysis of data, the planning of operations that most people will never know about. It is also a reminder of what is at stake. A nuclear-armed Iran would transform the Middle East. It would alter the calculations of every nation in the region. It would change the meaning of deterrence and the risks of miscalculation. The Shadow War is, at its core, a fight over that future, a fight waged in the dark, with consequences that will be measured in decades. Part 13, The Lesson. There is a phrase in intelligence work that rarely appears in public: sources and methods. Refers to the people who provide information and the techniques used to obtain it. Protecting sources and methods is the first commandment of espionage. Everything else is secondary. The Tehran Heist broke that commandment deliberately. By revealing the operation, Israel exposed its methods and endangered any sources who might be traced. It did so because the strategic value of exposure outweighed the cost. The message mattered more than the secrecy. That calculation tells us something about the nature of modern intelligence. In an age of information warfare, secrets are not just collected, they are deployed. An operation is not complete when the files are secured. It is complete when the story is told. Epilogue: The weight of paper. 1/2 ton. That is what the team carried out of Tehran. 1/2 ton of paper and disks loaded into vehicles driven through the night, spirited across borders. 1/2 ton of secrets that a nation believed were safe. In a world of digital espionage, there is something almost archaic about it, the physicality of the theft, the weight of the evidence. But that weight was the point. Paper cannot be dismissed as a hack. Originals cannot be waved away as forgeries. The archive was heavy, because the truth it carried was heavy. Somewhere in Israel, those files are still being studied. Somewhere in Iran, the men who lost them are still being questioned. And somewhere in the space between, in the Shadow War, that neither side can win and neither side can stop, the next operation is already being planned. The Tehran Heist proved that no secret is safe forever. It proved that reach and nerve can penetrate the most guarded places. And it proved something else, something that every intelligence officer knows but rarely says aloud. In the contest between nations, the most dangerous weapon is not a bomb or a missile. It is knowledge and the will to use it.